Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We got a brand new story to dive into, so let's get started. I'm Eric, and today I want to share something personal, my story. It's about someone I had known for years, someone I trusted completely, someone I was planning to marry. But then, in a single moment, everything changed. And in that moment, I didn't just see her for who she truly was. I realized what I had been ignoring all along. Before I get into what happened, let's go back to the beginning, back to when things were good. At least, that's what I believed. Vanessa and I had been together for a long time. We weren't the kind of couple that rushed into things. We had history. I had been there for her through every stage of her life, long before she secured her dream job at a top consulting firm. Back when she was struggling to find her path, unsure what to do next, I was right there beside her. I encouraged her, helped her prepare for interviews, and stayed up late listening to her frustrations over rejection emails. I believed in her, even when she doubted herself, and I never once made her feel like she wasn't enough. Photography had always been my dream. It wasn't just a hobby. It was my passion, my career, my life. I poured everything into it, working hard to save up for the best camera equipment I could afford. I built my portfolio from scratch, starting with small local events and gradually making my way to having my work featured in well-known magazines. And I wasn't just scraping by. I was thriving. I was proud of what I had built. In the beginning, Vanessa was proud of me too. I remember how she used to talk about my work with admiration. She'd tell people, "Eric is insanely talented. His photos are incredible." She would show my pictures to her friends and even brag about the time my work was published. I truly believed she saw me for who I was, someone who had turned his passion into something real, something meaningful. I had no reason to think that would ever change. But then, little by little, it did. At first, it was just small remarks that didn't seem like much. Vanessa had just started her new job at the consulting firm, and I knew she was under a lot of pressure, long hours, demanding clients, and adjusting to a high-stakes environment. I figured if she was stressed, I could be patient. But then, the way she spoke about my work started to shift. It wasn't outright dismissive, at least not at first. The first time it happened, we were having dinner, discussing wedding plans. I was excitedly talking about a new camera lens I'd been saving up for when she sighed and said, "You should really think about getting a stable job. Weddings are expensive, you know." She laughed afterward, brushing it off as a joke. I didn't dwell on it. A few weeks later, we were at the mall when she ran into a coworker. She waved but didn't call me over right away. When she returned, she casually mentioned that she hadn't introduced me because she wasn't sure how to explain what I did for a living. I remember standing there, confused. I tried to shake it off, telling myself she didn't mean anything by it. But then, the third time, there was no mistaking her intent. We were at home, having a casual conversation, when she suddenly said, "I mean, photography is nice and all, but it's not exactly a career, right?" She said it so nonchalantly, like she hadn't even considered how hurtful it sounded. That was the moment I finally saw it. She wasn't joking. She genuinely believed it. In her eyes, everything I had built from the ground up was just a side hobby, not a legitimate profession. Still, I let it slide. I made excuses for her, convincing myself she didn't mean any harm. This was Vanessa, the woman I had loved for years. She had always supported me before, so I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Looking back, that was my first mistake. Then came the night she invited me as her plus one to her company's annual office party. The venue was high-end, an exclusive event hall with towering glass walls, sleek modern decor, and a sea of sharply dressed professionals who all seemed to belong. There was a certain air about them, polished confidence, effortless smiles, and an unspoken understanding that they were part of the same world. I wasn't intimidated, not exactly, but I was aware of the contrast. The way they carried themselves, the way they spoke, it was all about high-stakes deals, career advancements, and six-figure salaries. Their conversations revolved around promotions and corporate strategies, and I knew I didn't fit that mold, but I wasn't ashamed of what I did. I loved my work. Vanessa introduced me to a small circle of her colleagues. For 5 of them, all holding drinks and engaged in easy conversation about work, travel, and upcoming projects with big-name clients. I stood beside her, listening, nodding along as they exchanged stories about their industry. Then one of them, a guy around our age, dressed in a crisp navy suit, turned to me with a polite yet expectant expression. "So, Eric, what do you do?" His tone was neutral, but I could sense the assumptions behind it. He probably expected me to say I worked in consulting or tech, something that fit seamlessly into this environment. Before I could respond, Vanessa spoke up first. She let out a small, amused scoff, the kind that signals something funny is about to be said. Then, with a smirk, she swirled her drink and said, "Oh, Eric? His job is basically just taking fancy selfies for money." The moment those words left her mouth, laughter erupted around us. Not just polite chuckles, but real amusement, like she had just delivered the best joke of the night. A few exchanged knowing glances, smirking like they had suddenly figured something out about me. One of the women even nodded and said, "Oh, that's cute." I stood there, feeling the weight of their laughter pressing in on me. And in that instant, I saw Vanessa for who she truly was. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a harmless joke. This was how she saw me, how she had probably always seen me. In her eyes, I wasn't professional. I wasn't someone with a real career. I was just some guy who took pictures for a living. Something trivial, something she could mock without a second thought. And suddenly, everything made sense. The small, dismissive comments she had made before, the passive-aggressive remarks, the hesitation whenever someone asked what I did. She wasn't proud of me. She wasn't proud to stand beside me. To her, my work wasn't respectable enough. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to spend my life with someone who looked down on me. I tightened my grip around my drink, steadying myself before setting it down on the nearest table. Then I met Vanessa's gaze, her smirk fading as she noticed a shift in my expression. "If you don't respect what I do, then you don't respect me," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And I won't spend my life with someone who belittles me." Silence. The room, once buzzing with conversation, seemed to pause. Eyes flickered between us, waiting to see how she would respond. Vanessa stared at me, her expression unreadable at first. Then, as if trying to brush it off, she let out a nervous laugh, like she still believed she could turn this into something lighthearted. But I wasn't laughing. Without another word, I reached for her hand, slid the engagement ring off her finger, and tucked it into my pocket. A few gasps rippled to the crowd. Someone near the bar muttered, "Damn." But I wasn't interested in their reactions. I didn't need an audience for this. I turned and walked away, leaving behind not just Vanessa, but the entire space where I had never truly belonged. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I stood. At first, Vanessa didn't reach out. Not a single text, not a single call. Nothing. And honestly, I wasn't surprised. She had always been too proud to admit when she was wrong, too unwilling to face anything that might make her look bad. After that party, she must have felt embarrassed, not just because I had left her standing there in front of her friends, but because I had done it on my own terms. I wasn't the one being laughed at anymore. I was the one who walked away. And for someone like Vanessa, who valued appearances above all else, that had to sting. Weeks passed, and then, out of nowhere, the silence broke. She sent a message. It was long, but the words were predictable. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I didn't mean it like that. You know I respect you. I was just joking, and I didn't realize how it came across. Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a moment, letting it sink in. If she had sent this right after the party, if she had reached out that night, or even the next day, maybe, just maybe, I would have believed her. Maybe I would have thought she had simply made a mistake, that she truly felt remorseful. But after weeks of silence, after all that time without a single word, I knew better. And this time, I wasn't going to ignore what I had always seen but never wanted to admit. It wasn't regret. No, this wasn't about realizing she had hurt me. It was about controlling the damage. Vanessa wasn't reaching out because she suddenly respected me or saw the mistake she had made. She was reaching out because she didn't like how it looked. to her friends, to her family, to everyone who had expected to be at our wedding. But I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just saw the truth for the first time. Vanessa had never truly been proud of me. She had accepted my career, tolerated it even, but she had never respected it. What she really wanted was a fiancé who fit into the polished world she was building for herself. Someone with an impressive title. Someone she could introduce without needing to explain. That wasn't me. It had never been me. So I responded, not out of spite, not to argue, just to close that door for good. I appreciate the message. I wish you the best. Vanessa, I really do. But it's time for us both to move on. Short, clear, final. She never replied. And I knew she wouldn't. That was the moment I realized what I deserved. Someone who didn't just tolerate my dreams, but actually believed in them. Someone who wouldn't diminish my passion, whether we were alone or in a crowded room. And once I accepted that, I knew exactly what I had to do next. I packed my bags. That small town had been my comfort zone for too long, and I refused to stay there, surrounded by the remnants of a life that almost happened. I had always dreamed of taking my photography to the next level, and there was only one place I knew I could do that: New York. It was daunting. It was expensive. But for the first time in years, I was making a decision for me. No compromises. No second-guessing. Just a man chasing what he loves. And that felt like real freedom. I started saying yes to everything: fashion shoots, high-profile events, travel gigs. Anything that pushed me, anything that expanded my portfolio. I worked harder than ever, but this time, it felt different. It felt like I was building something real, something mine, something no one could ever diminish. Months passed, and I wasn't just getting by. I was thriving. Then one day, an email landed in my inbox that changed everything. One of my photographs had been shortlisted for a major international award. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I reread the email 3 times just to be sure. But it was real. Out of thousands of entries from around the world, my work had been chosen. And when I finally saw my name listed as a winner, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Not because I couldn't believe it, but because I could. I had always believed in myself, even when others didn't. And now, the world was finally seeing what I had always known. I was damn good at what I did. I don't know if Vanessa ever saw the news. Maybe she regretted how things ended. Maybe she convinced herself she had been right all along. But honestly, I don't care. That chapter of my life is over. And out of everything I gained after walking away, the biggest win wasn't the award. It wasn't the recognition. It was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, I was surrounded by people who truly valued me. People who saw my work as art, not just some trivial hobby. And among them was someone who didn't just admire what I did. She respected it. Someone who saw me for who I was and never made me feel small for it. Because here's the thing, respect in a relationship isn't optional. I learned that the hard way. When someone constantly mocks your dreams, even if they say it with a laugh, even if they call it a joke, you need to listen. Because those jokes, they tell you exactly how that person sees you. And if they don't respect what you do, they don't respect you. Period. I spent too long making excuses, convincing myself I was overreacting. But looking back, it's crystal clear. Someone who loves you doesn't tear down what makes you happy. They don't belittle your passion just because it doesn't fit their definition of success. I walked away because staying would have meant losing myself. And yeah, ending an engagement in the middle of a crowded party was exactly how I pictured things going. But you know what? I have never, not for a single moment, regretted choosing my self-respect over a relationship that made me feel like I wasn't enough. So if you're in a situation like that, if you're with someone who keeps downplaying what matters to you, step back and ask yourself, do I really want to spend my life proving my worth to someone who refuses to see it? Because you don't have to. The right person will recognize your value without you ever having to convince them. Anyway, that's my story. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with something like this? What would you have done in my place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know.